Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Spanner Man again here with another video. Today we're just going to talk briefly about attack angles. There's a few people out there a little bit confused of what an attack angle is, but generally speaking, in mechanical terms or geometry, if you're using a lathe and you put a bit in there to turn a bit of steel, it normally needs to be, at an angle. Just say for argument's sake it was 90 degrees to the rotating moving part. So you could have a 90-degree attack angle. So it's the angle that, and a drill could have 60-degree angle on it. So if we were to look at a drill bit, those angles on top there, they are the attack angles. If you change those angles, it may not cut as well. So you can change angles for different type of steel. Stainless steel needs a different attack angle than mild steel. Now, chainsaws. Most people don't use attack angles in chainsaws. So what is the attack angle on a chainsaw tooth? The attack angle is from this point to this point here. What is that angle there? On a brand new chain, it's approximately anywhere from 4.4 to 5.5. It's reasonable angle, but it's not ideal. The best angle that you could have would be about 6.1 in hardwood, and you could go up to about 7 in softwood. And if you had a really powerful saw, you could possibly go to 8. So where do you use an attack angle? Is it necessary? If you were using a square grind and maybe you're in a competition and you really wanted to make sure that every tooth was perfect, had the right angle, you could use attack angle. Yes, you could use your progressive depth gauge. So for the preparation of attack angle, we would not use this type of gauge because this only measures 0.65 of a millimeter, so it's a constant depth gauge, so it's not to be used in preparation for attack angle. So what we would do is either file or grind our teeth as razor sharp as we can get them, the left side, the right side. Inspect the chain. When you're happy with it and you think it's razor sharp, you need to get yourself a progressive depth gauge like this or Husqvarna ones. You place that on top. If the depth gauge protrudes out the square slot, then you proceed to file it. So when you put the angle gauge on, after that, you'll find out you'll get an angle. And the angle that you're looking for is about 6.1. That's the angle you're looking for. Now, these angle gauges measure 0.1 of a degree. So, again, we're measuring from this point to this point. 6.1. They're fairly sensitive, these gauges, so they're quite sensitive. So if you were to ask me, why would that attack angle be so important as opposed to just using a normal progressive depth gauge? Look, there's nothing wrong with using a progressive depth gauge. This is the extreme. So this is what I'm talking about for those people out there that really want to know. That when a tooth comes down into the attack position, comes around the top, goes around the nose bar, and it's ready to dig into a bit of timber. The moment it digs in a timber, it pushes the tooth back. The tooth comes off the guide, off the bar, until it hits the depth gauge. Or in a lot of cases, the depth gauge might go into the timber, even a millimetre, depends on how soft the timber is. Then it takes a chunk of timber out, then it straightens back up. Then the tooth behind it. So they've got this rocking motion as they're travelling through the timber. So the moment that you hit timber with a chainsaw tooth, it has this rocking motion. As the tooth wears down, you have to increase the depth. So attack angle, we don't use a depth gauge. We are measuring an angle. But obviously the greater the angle, the more the depth gauge will be. So in this case, if we were to prepare a tooth like this, and this particular tooth was, say, half worn down, we might have a gap of 0.9 of a millimetre, say 0.9, using a progressive depth gauge. When we use the attack angle gauge, we might increase from 0.9, we could go to 0.95. I guess it's fine-tuning the system. And you might say, well, why do you want to do that? See, there's a lot of people out there that we all know that grinders are much faster than a file. And if you use the right grinding wheel on a grinder, you don't overheat the tooth and you don't temper it. All those pink wheels, throw them in the rubbish, get yourself a brown oxide minimum, or get yourself a CBN wheel, which is even better. The diamond wheels are not for normal chainsaw teeth, they're for tungsten carbide, so you want a CBN wheel. Failing that, I guess hand filing is a passion for a lot of people. It's something that you can do by hand rather than a machine. And for a lot of us out there, maybe on the weekend, we want to pull the old hand file out and see how good we are at hand filing, the old traditional type way of doing something. And I guess that's what it is, a bit of a passion for that. So if you want to take that one step further, you can use a digital angle gauge so that you can set the digital attack angle. There's a little bit of this information that you can find on Carlton, the Complete Handbook, if you do a search on the internet, and it talks about it a little bit. There's also a video on my channel where you see the teeth rocking up and down. And not every single tooth takes the same amount of chip. So it can vary depending on the timber. It just depends on a lot of things. How loose, how tight your chain is. All these factors have a little bit of difference on the rocking action and the attack angle. And the only thing that I'd probably like to say lastly, that when we start to get down to the witness mark, we still maintain that attack angle, and that attack angle will set the depth. It's just another way of doing something. You can do a search on the internet. You're not going to find much information about attack angle of chainsaw teeth. There's very, very little out there. I've only recently learned about it in the last couple of months. So it's been a fairly steep learning curve, but I can see the advantages of doing so if you've got the time and you're a bit of a perfectionist. Not everyone is. With some people, near enough is good enough. But if you're one of those persons that only goes out occasionally and you want your chain super sharp, well balanced. Now by well balanced, I mean that the left side is cutting the same amount of timber as the right side. Then a digital gauge could be for you. If you do decide to go out and buy a gauge and watch some of my videos out there on how to do it, you'll notice what I've done on the bottom here is put a bit of metal, because you've got magnets at the side. Sorry, no, there's only magnet at the bottom. Oh, okay, sorry. So this will stick to metal, but it doesn't sit on the tooth very good with that little indentation in the middle. So that's why I've put a bit of metal on there, so I've got a better flat surface like that. Very, very. Now, you'll see that if you tip the gauge, you'll say error. The reason that is, anything over 30-degree tilt will go to error, because inside here is a very precision pendulum. And that pendulum moves backwards and forwards, and that's how they actually work. Very precision, very accurate. Anyway, that's about all I can say. You won't find much more information out there about digital attack of the angle of the chainsaw tooth. That's probably the best explanation that I can give you. So just to finally recap, that if you're one of those perfectionists and you're chasing hardness, the first thing that you do is sharpen your chain as best as possible, recheck it left and right, maybe go back over it. Once you're satisfied, and I guess you try and keep the teeth as uniform as possible. But in some situations, a couple of teeth here and there, if they're a little bit shorter, don't worry about that too much. It's not going to be a major issue, because the moment you use this type of gauge, it'll sort that correct depth out. The angle gauge does not go on depth. It's related to depth, but it does not go on depth. It measures an angle. And obviously, when you change the angle, the depth increases. So if 6.1 is for hardwood and you've got a very powerful saw and you decide that you want to take your angle up to 7, that's okay if you've got a very powerful saw. But if you don't have a powerful saw, I'd stick with 6.1. Anyway, look, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed that little talk about angle gauge. Bye for now.